Frost, we have you now. You're back in the room, so free to have your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, committee, for allowing me to ask the question today. 3 months ago, the committee resolved to grant planning permission to the application at Hainbury Farm. That's application 23/01618/hybrid. And the response of the committee was pretty much unanimous, apart from one abstention. And I think one member of the committee commented on what a creative use of land our application is. However, since that time, over the last 3 months, almost on a daily basis, we've been trying to get the name of the council's solicitor so that we can connect them with our solicitor and the Section 106 discussions can begin. But despite dozens of emails from myself, from our solicitor, from our planning consultant, we have got nowhere. And we're now at a point of risking losing the developers who are interested because we've made absolutely no progress. And my question is, what do we need to do to simply get the name of the council solicitor so that we can put them in touch with our solicitor and the discussions on Section 106 can begin and we can move this forward? Thank you, Chair.
Back on.
Sure.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So hopefully you can hear me, Mr. Young. So obviously, firstly, apologies for the delay in this point and the frustration experienced. We do have a solicitor allocated to deal with this now. They should have been in touch with either yourself or your solicitor. Their name is Michael Jones, and but if you haven't already been in contact with them, I'll make sure I'm in contact with them today.
Thank you, Chair. And Michael Jones, which company?
Michael Jones. It is on. Michael Jones is a solicitor working for the council.
I see. Well, if you could forward me his contact details, that would be much appreciated.
I will ask him to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully the rest of the meeting will go a little bit smoother now. I keep these towards those flashing blue lights at the end of the room. We have no one else wishing to speak in public question time. So we move on to agenda item 5, which is planning application 19/01871/REM land, Park Torbay Road, Castle Kelly, Somerset. I'll hand you over to Rachel to give a presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. This application is for the reserved matters following outline planning permission of the application 15/02347/OUT. Just to note that the outline application also included 2 hectares of employment land and a school site, which are not included within the scope of this application. It's just a residential area of the outline scheme, which is brought forward by this reserved matters application in detail. This proposal seeks approval for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for a development of 162 homes. Access arrangements have been previously approved as part of the outline. This includes a road linking Torbay Road with Station Road. This application has a contrary comment from the Parish Council, hence why the application is then reported here today. Key considerations for the committee to take into account are outlined here. Note that the principle of development was considered within the outline application. And we'll come on to these key considerations in further detail later. The This is the location of the application site, situated to the north-east of the town centre of Castle Carey, which is shown just at the bottom right-hand corner of the site. The site comprises of fields containing trees and hedgerows with public footpaths along the south and southwest sides of the site. It slopes from Station Road, bounding the site to the east, down to the west. And the site is broadly surrounded by existing development. Existing residential areas are located to the north, east and south. To the west is an employment area. Slightly more showing the relationship of the context at a larger scale. Note that the residential development to the site's northeast is currently under development, and that's Woodford Meadow. This is a satellite image of the site, zoomed back out to that small scale, showing the site within the grain of the town surrounding. Now for the site photos. Image 1 and 2 here are both taken from the east of the site, looking northwest at the existing surrounding residential development. The images are looking onto Mulberry Meadows, a development of 125 houses to the northwest. And that development is a mixture of brick, render and stone properties. Towards the right of image 2 shows Woodford Meadow, a smaller development, partially complete and currently under construction. Behind in the distance to the right of image 2 behind this is a newly constructed development of brick homes named Lovely Farm. Image 3 is taken from the west area of the site, looking northeast and seeing the edge of the Woodford Meadow development. And image 4 is taken from the east area of the site, looking east back towards Station Road, where the line of houses running along it is visible. And these are 2-storey mid-20th century terraces. And it's actually the rear elevations we are seeing here, which back onto a large open green space running up to the road from the back of the houses. Image 5 and 6 here are views looking up at the development and the dense tree lined edge that bounds the site on the southeast corner. 6 is taken just slightly westwards of 5, down the slope. And finally, images 7 and 8 here are views looking west, down the slope with the view in the distance. 7 is taken from the site and 8 is taken from Station Road, looking at the site's current access point. Moving on to the proposal now. Shown here is the proposed site layout. The design proposal takes forward the high-level design principle put forward at the outline stage. Consideration has been given here to ensuring that the scale of development is appropriate to the setting, whilst responding to local character and policy requirements. A road links Station Road to the east and Torbow Road to the south, a dedicated link for the new development. And just to note here, that general access arrangement was agreed at the outline stage. The proposed layout has been designed to integrate with the surrounding built environment while responding to site constraints, including topography, existing vegetation and key views. The proposal puts forward distinct character areas which the development is structured around. These character areas are shown here, each with their own identity. The main street in blue, the eastern frontage in purple, and the secondary lanes in pink. This approach supports a legible layout that is responsive to the site's wider landscape setting and introduces structure. Shown here are the proposed street elevations. The proposed materials reflect the character of Castle Carey and the surrounding residential area, incorporating stone, brick and render to ensure a cohesive visual connection with existing surrounding development. The stepping of the roof levels, varied house widths, and also a mix of semis versus detached housing, some dormer windows and gable ends, gives good variety in addition to the range of materials used. The eastern frontage is shown there at the top, looking at the row of houses set back from Station Road, running parallel to it. The main street is shown second down, continuing into the elevation third down, closer to the Torbay Road access point to the southwest. Turning now to the main material considerations for this stage. Firstly, the design, layout and scale of the proposed development. The scheme has been shaped in line with both national and local planning policy, responding to policy EQ2 of the South Somerset Local Plan and Section 12 of the NPPF, which together promotes high quality design that reflects and enhances local character. The scale and layout of 162 dwellings has been developed with sensitivity to the surrounding context. So 3 character areas reflecting the site's topography, existing vegetation and important views. Engagement with the Quality Review Panel, the QRP, played a key role in shaping the design. And following the panel's feedback, reconfigurations were made to the design, most notably reducing the hard standing area and roads, particularly around the western block, and strengthening the site's green infrastructure. The material choice, stone, brick and render, reflects the existing surroundings, the development and Castle Carey's local vernacular. Key buildings have been positioned to influence wayfinding and enhance visual interest. So, in summary, the design has been considered carefully, responding positively to feedback and policy to deliver a coherent scheme that sits well within its local context. Next, residential amenity. The proposal complies with policy EQ2 and NPPF section 12 to protect privacy and overall living quality. The design uses careful layout and buffers, including tree planting, to reduce overlooking and noise. So now, just to set out the proposal's relationship with the immediate context that was described and pictured earlier. At the north boundary, Woodford Meadow, dwellings are set back 14 to 19 metres with planting and existing trees providing screening. Along Station Road and near Torbay Close to the east and south, a green buffer of up to 46 metres separates new plots from existing homes. Some homes along Torbay Road sit closer to the boundary, but these are well screened by existing dense cover, tree cover and planting. To the southwest, the development sits immediately adjacent to the employment land area set aside, not residential, so there's no impact on residential amenity in that area. So overall, with these measures, it's considered that any overbearing or overlooking conditions are avoided. While with appropriate separation and landscaping, residential amenity is fully safeguarded. And while it is noted that there will be a change in the visual outlook of various surrounding properties, no harm is found to residential amenity. Onto highways now. The access arrangements, as I said earlier, were secured at the outline stage through a Section 106 agreement and a framework travel plan, and therefore are for reassessment now. All traffic impact concerns have been raised again. These were assessed and deemed acceptable previously, so they are not material to this reserved matters stage. This application instead focuses on the internal road layout parking and connectivity. Following feedback from the highways officer and the QRP, key improvements were made. These include reducing road dominance in the western area, changing 2 single-sided access parallel roads to a single road, and introducing private drives and courtyards in the south to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. The highways officer raised no objection, and any remaining technical details can be resolved through the Section 38 process. Overall, the scheme is compliant with both local policies and national guidance on safe, accessible and well-connected transport design. And these are policy LN21, TA5 and TA6 of the South Somerset Local Plan, which address matters of transport and accessibility, including the provision of safe, accessible and well-connected transport design. Now on to landscape, ecology and phosphates. The scheme is guided by policies EQ2, EQ4 and EQ5 of the local plan, as well as section 14 and 15 of the NPPF. These policies emphasise the importance of creating well-designed spaces that incorporate ecological enhancement, promote biodiversity, and provide accessible public open spaces. The landscape design reflects the outline strategy and includes 2.3 hectares of open space, exceeding policy requirements. In response to feedback from the QRP, a pedestrian footbridge was added across the brook to improve connectivity and access to the central play space, which now sits within a 3-minute walk from all new proposed homes. Whilst the proposal does cut through an ecological corridor from Station Road, which has been already agreed to outline, the scheme introduces additional tree planting in streets and public spaces, so reinforcing the site's green character and ensuring the presence of nature within the development's heart. And that was a key consideration that was raised by the QRP, which they were keen to promote. The ecological strategy confirms that previous ecological findings remain valid, with mitigation secured by conditions from the outline application, including a badger mitigation plan and lighting controls. A full habitats regulation assessment has been undertaken, with impacts offset by secured phosphate credits from approved farms in both catchment areas affected. And finally, to conclude, these strategies comply with both local and national planning policies, promoting biodiversity, public access to nature, and delivering appropriate mitigation where needed. No objections were raised, again, by relevant consultees. Finally, on to drainage and flood risk. The application has been assessed in terms of flood risk and surface water drainage in line with policies EQ1 of the local plan and section 14 of the NPPF. The Lead Local Flood Authority, or the LLFA, has reviewed the scheme, including recent layout changes and updated drainage calculations. The drainage strategy includes balancing funds with overflow systems and is designed to accommodate a 1 in 100 year flood event, plus climate change allowance. The LLFA raised no objection, confirming the application meets both national and local policy requirements, and also incorporates appropriate measures to manage the flood risk. In summary, this preserved matters application for 162 dwellings has been carefully assessed and is deemed acceptable in principle. It demonstrates a well-considered approach to layout, design, highways, landscape, drainage and ecology. It reflects local and national planning policy and responds positively to consultee feedback as well as the QRP's feedback. Therefore, as summarised, the key issues raised are all deemed acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, so we move on to public questions and comments, and I start with Fletcher Robinson. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you start the timer, may I just say that I'm speaking on behalf of CPR Somerset. Thank you. Okay, hold on 1 second. Before you begin the timer, can I just explain that I'm speaking on behalf of CPR Somerset, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Okay, please start the timer now. Thank you. The 2015 indicative outline plan scheme was a good scheme, but it's been replaced by one that, in the opinion of our trustees, is poorly designed. Although also this scheme certainly does not resolve the concerns raised by Somerset Council's Quality Review Panel last June. The review panel criticised the scheme on many grounds. It's a low-density estate of mainly high-value executive homes on large plots. There's further waste of space caused by the wide roads and hard surfaced areas and the over provision of 2.2 parking spaces per house, despite the proximity of the town station. There are unattractive blocks of parking spaces between short terraces of housing rather than rear courtyard parking and an inadequate play area. There have been minor amendments only in response to this criticism, including realigning one of the roads and inserting some more street trees and a pedestrian bridge over the stream, allowing easier access to the small play area. Importantly, this scheme bears very little resemblance to the approved indicative 2015 outline design, other than site access and retained watercourse. That was an attractive scheme featuring higher densities, clusters of housing, rear parking courtyards, and several distinct neighbourhoods with potential unique identities. Regrettably, it's been replaced by this bland anywhere estate in defiance of the National Design Guide. The proposed layout of identikit houses, regimented along characterless wide roads, lacks identity and fails to draw on placemaking examples found in the town centre, like carriageway arches for access to rear parking courtyards. The 2015 scheme, with higher density zones, released more land for communal use and green ecological corridors, whereas this scheme reduces the ecological corridors to a single green tract along the watercourse and a leftover steep slope next to Station Road that is of no use to anyone. The diminution of design quality in pursuit of greater returns is a common ploy used by developers to obtain outline approval for an attractive scheme and then replace it with a more profitable anywhere scheme. The committee now has an opportunity to refuse reserved matters permission as directed by NPPF paragraph 139. Development that is not well designed should be refused. At the very least, it should be deferred so that the review panel can be asked whether these minor amendments really address the fundamental concerns that it had about this scheme. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, I call Vicky Nobles from Care for Carey.
Chair, council members, good afternoon. I'm here to speak on behalf of Care for Carey, a local organisation representing 400 supporters in the Carey, Ansford and Carey-Moore parishes. We understand that this site is in the direction of growth for Carey and Ansford as per the local plan. We also understand that the housing land supply, for well-known reasons, is equivalent to 2.11 years. Consequently, the tilted balance lies in favour of approval. But we will argue that before any decision is taken, the committee should be 100% satisfied that this development application adheres to all local and national policies and that the conditions of the S106 agreement are set in stone, i.e. not to be changed at a future date. CBRA Sunset have addressed very well the changes to site design. Kerry will just know that the quality review panel states that it is very open to re-engagement with the developer. Perhaps there is an opportunity here for this committee to require the developer to do so prior to any approval being given. I doubt if any council officers here today are fully briefed on the 12 years history of the discussions concerning this site. Prior to outline application approval, discussions were undertaken involving stakeholders, the owners, council officers, local councillors and local bodies like Care for Caring. It was through those discussions that agreement was made in terms of access. The sound road safety reasons, there should be no access to the housing development site from Broadway Road after the first 25 houses have been built. Unfortunately, Personal Homes subsequently tried to override this decision and have access from the development on the Broadway Road in perpetuity. It took many weeks for our town council to persuade them otherwise. As a result, in their revised reserve matters application, 12 houses only have permanent access to Broadway Road. We accepted this, but offer it as an example of changes being sought and it has already been agreed. I would like to address the words that appear 3 times in the officer's report in relation to retention, trees and vegetation. Inverted commas, with the exception of the roadside boundary, brackets Station Road, close inverted commas. Why is this exception made? Because the decades, maybe centuries old hedge had already been uprooted by the owner developer Personal Homes before March the 1st and before this committee has even met to consider the application. Significantly more hedge has been removed than is required for displays allowing safe site access. We strongly request that developers replant the hedge outside the displays area immediately. The removal of the hedge means that everyone can now see how steep a drop there is into the site from Station Road. The officer's report references a maximum gradient on site of 1 in 10. This will require considerable engineering on the boundary of Station Road. This must be completed before completion of the first 25 houses, so that the interim access from Torbay Road can be closed as all construction traffic for the 26th house onwards must be via Station Road as agreed in the outline agreement.
Thank you, Mrs. Nobles. Thank you.
I have actually finished.
Thank you very much. Next, can I please call Councillor Hophouse, who is the one of the ward members?
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. This was passed originally in 2015 by Area South. This is an updated version you're looking at today. This is an infill now because the inspectors filled up Station Road going towards the station with 1, 2, 3, 4 cleared applications which are partially or fully built out. I have one problem with the planning as it's going through at the moment in that they have still left the site as they're claiming for the new school. Our present school is not full and there are no plans to build a new school on that site at this time because we don't have a full primary school. The 2 entrances are unfortunate. We were hoping that Tara Renewals were going to purchase the industrial site on the southwestern side. That deal's fallen through, so we are now in a position where we have to have barriers to stop the through road going between Torbay Road and Station Road. I would ask you to put this through. There is a problem locally in that Persimmon have taken out far too much of the hedge on Station Road. They have admitted this. I tried to get the enforcement officers. They did come down. They told me that the plans were not wrong, but they were wrong, and Persimmon are going to replant the hedge that they should not have taken out. Our actual enforcement officers failed completely to do their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor West. Can I actually have you just to switch the microphone off for me, please? And then can you just switch the microphone? Okay, thank you very much for that. So we move on to questions from members. Any questions, Councillor Curley?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. First question is involving flooding. So I noticed that you said that it would be fit for a 1 in 100 year event. We've been finding out that a 1 in 100 year event is actually happening every other year. So if it is done to the standards that we are now finding is every other year, then that's not good enough. Or has the 1 in 100 year definition changed? So that's my first question. I don't know whether you want to answer them individually or you'll give all. I've got 3 questions.
Just to comment on that, I do know that 45% climate change allowance has been considered, and I know that is higher than what is requested. So I know that it's kind of considered in tandem to that 1 in 100 year event.
I just think from a council's perspective, a 1 in 100 year event is a bit of a trigger sort of ratio because we're coming up against that all the time. So I'd like to know that there is bigger capacity in that. My other real question comes down to social housing. And I do share some concerns that I think the local parish had about the ghettoisation. I do see that there has been some work to try and change that. And there was a term that came up that I wasn't aware of, and I'd just like, would like to know what it means. What is a tenure blind layout?
Yeah.
That is on page 32.
I can cover that if it's helpful. So it's tenure blind basically means you can't tell what tenure is. So whether it's affordable rented, shared ownership. So tenure blind is that they have to provide X amount of number of properties, but you shouldn't be able to tell the difference between the affordable housing and market housing.
And that brings me to my final question, which was on the back of reading some of the mitigations that have been put in for ghettoisation. I noticed there was some reference to private drives. I just wanted to be assured that there were no service charges involved for these particular tenants and that all the roads were going to be of a condition that they can be adopted. So I'd just like that reassurance, please. Thank you.
So just to note that the final proposal, revision of the proposal doesn't actually include affordable homes feeding onto shared drives. There were 2 in the ultimate proposal, but we managed to swap those with market rate houses, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Councillor Ware?
Thank you. On the social homes, I didn't see it on the plan, it was a bit small. Are they pepper potted, as is our policy as a council, or are blocks and well, however? Where are they situated?
I'll buy a bit of time for Rachel to get the layout up. The affordable units, they are, there's couples of them in similar locations, but they are plotted around the site overall. So they're in little small clusters, but in various places around the site.
So we haven't got any 3-story blocks and which has been a habit of late. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Just like to add, there were apartment blocks in, again, a previous version of the proposal. However, comments from the housing officer asked for each unit had its own front door.
Yeah.
So we've kind of managed to make those flats, and yeah, we're building on that tenure blind principle there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for clarification, Councillor Osborne?
Let's see if this one works because it just
It's just working.
yeah.
Because I love that.
Yes, I think we know that, Martin. I think my nephew can feel the impact.
It doesn't go on very long.
Right.
Okay, well,
going to ask was, the board member referred to Persimmon taking too much of a hedge out, and Persimmon have agreed to replant. But I don't see anything actually in the conditions specifically relating to that. And I wonder whether there should be a specific clause. And I wonder whether there should be a specific clause or a line in the conditions to clarify that that had indeed got to happen. Because I think, as we all know, sometimes these things can get overlooked over time. That's my first question. And the second question relates to the design review, quality review panel, whatever it's called. How come that when the scheme was revised based on feedback, you didn't go back to the quality design panel to see what their views and feedback was on the amendments as to whether those met with approval?
In terms of enforcement, it was reported to enforcement. Enforcement did review it in terms of the removal of the hedgerow. The access, the location of the access and the visibility display was all approved as part of the outline planning application. There was conflicting information on the outline planning application because it did say hedgerow to be retained. What it also showed was engineering works with some banking going in where the access is. So if anyone knows anything about hedging, you can't bank it up full of soil and expect it to live. So they did take it out. They probably took out more than they should have done, but they took it out ahead of bird nesting season. So they haven't actually done anything criminal, but they have removed it, and they were perhaps a little bit overzealous when they were removing it. But it is due to be landscaped. It is shown to be landscaped, and it's conditioned to be landscaped through the outline planning permission. There are other conditions that have gone on, and the reason the conditions have been worded that no further work is because previously they were all prior to commencement. So if we'd have left it prior to commencement, technically we're conditioning them into breach, but this landscaping is controlled primarily through the outline, but again, further conditions on the approval of reserve matters. Okay.
Councillor Page?
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Rachel. Three sort of little questions, really. Can you just confirm the provision of the EV charging? Will the social housing, for example, have enough EV charging per property? The second question is, can you just confirm this, the provision for solar panels? And the third one, something I'm personally interested in, is there any provision of the development of building boxes for SWIFT, which is something to be encouraged in your new developments? Thank you.
Just on Rachel some time. So condition 3 on the permission does set out the requirements for the EV charging points. That's on page 58 of the report. If members want to have a look at that. As part of the ecological information submitted, there were sort of badger updates, agricultural constraints plans and a sustainability statement. I don't know if you've got access to the sustainability statement on hand, but that should set out what renewables are going in as part of the development.
And just to add on electric vehicle charging, yeah, I do believe that's part of the parking standards, and that is covered by condition in the report. So yeah, that's my answer to that question.
So there will be an EV charging point per property.
That's what I understand, and that's to all dwellings.
Thank you, councillor Messenger. I've been approached by the residents, existing residents of Torbay Road, and they're extremely concerned about the historic boundary which lies behind their properties and the security and the probability of overlooking. What precautions have we taken to make sure these things are all protected? Thank you.
So as per the presentation, I introduced the surrounding context. I then came on to analyse the impact, if any, on residential amenity. Just, yeah, got the proposal on the screen there. I think one of the biggest kind of consideration we have to overlooking is that the east side where the row of houses directly on Station Road at the top of the hill that comes to the site. However, a 46-metre buffer, so that's along that eastern strip there, gives a really good distance before any of the dwellings of the proposal starts. And then the kind of other key zones where the residential development existing around it, we have dense covering on the borderlines there. So that's the northeast and the southeast. And they're the kind of, yeah, they're the points where the dwellings come closest to the site boundary line.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I share Councillor Page. Thank you for helping. Page's concerns about EV charging. I know that condition 3 does deal with EV charging, but I'm just concerned that we haven't had that plan prior to being able to make a decision today. Is it standard practice to have an agreement on EV charging after the fact?
Yes. And it's covered by building regulations. So in theory, we could not impose it because it's already covered by other legislation, but we do have a policy that encourages us to put it on, but we don't have the detail of it. And 9 times out of 10 EV charging points are now permitted development. So you wouldn't necessarily see the detail on existing development. Obviously, as a new development, it's infrastructure that'll be going in.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Welcome.
Very quickly, I don't think it also answered my second point about why the amended design wasn't referred back to the design panel for feedback, that actually that the concerns were adequately addressed by the amendments. And also going back to condition 3, it doesn't explicitly stating there 1 charging point per dwelling. It's just generally, it's speaking more in general terms about each charging point. It's not committing the developer to 1 per dwelling. So that possibly needs to be tightened up, and that might be something you want to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the EV charging point, it was imposed by highways. It would come in and get discharged by highways, and highways have the supplementary planning document that sets out the requirement for a single one per unit. So that is the policy that we cross-checking it to. In terms of the policy review panel, absolutely brilliant service. They do charge every single time you go to them. So if you've been to them once, had constructive feedback, that's included in a detailed report setting out what all the issues are for the site and recommendations in terms of how they could be adjusted. As professional planning officers, we do look at the plans historically before policy review panel even existed, but now with their comments and the alterations to the design scheme, so we're satisfied as officers we can make that assessment in terms of whether the improvements are sufficient enough that we end up supporting the scheme. If we have significant concerns, we would be pushing them back through design and the panel again to try and address those to get to a point where we'd be satisfied we can present it to members. But it's charged and the cost is picked up by the developer.
Thank you, Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that point, the CPRE spokesperson did comment on the fact that the original application, 2015, seemed to have many merits. This new submission, he was very critical of. It does seem a pity that the original application isn't in front of us. And again, that does make a strong case for this should have been referred to the quality review panel, given it's such a change from the one that was originally approved. Thank you.
Just
outline, yeah.
Yeah, so the outline planning commission on the criticisms that I heard from the speaker was that the density is much lower now than what it was. So the Outline Planning Commission granted outline consent for 165 dwellings.
Yeah.
The detail they've got for you is 162. So there is a 3 dwelling difference between the indicative much higher density outline versus the approval of reserve matters. So officers, having looked at the proposal and the design review comments and the subsequent revisions and alterations to the design, officers are now satisfied with the proposal in terms of recommending it. There will always be differences between an approval of reserve matters application and an indicative master plan for the outline. But the net loss in terms of overall density is 3 units, which officers don't consider to be significant. And given the landscape sort of protection for the edges, you know, officers are satisfied the right balance has been struck.
There is also a comment about the planning for the parking, that in the original scheme, that seemed to be very good and now it's been changed, which again seems to be a retrograde step. Has that been taken into account?
Yeah, I'll handle this one. So the large blocks of parking were considered following the quality review panel's feedback, and those have been changed to 4 rather than 6 blocks, interspersed with tree planting and also introducing varied surface treatment. So, yeah, contributing to planning those making principles a bit better there. Yeah, just trying to kind of break those up so there's less of a sea of cars.
Thank you very much. If there are no further clarification.
Yeah, one very pedantic final point. On page 36, we've got a reference to Somerset Waste Partnership. I think that's been taken off an old SSDC application. Somerset Waste Partnership no longer exists. So just to amend that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll move us into the debate. Who'd like to kick us off? Next messenger. Hi, I'm the second divisional councillor for Castle Kerry alongside Henry Hobhouse. This application has been going on for a very long time now, for 15 years. I know my colleague, Mr. Hobhouse, has been heavily involved in it and tried to negotiate things that would be good for Castle Kerry. Castle Kerry, unfortunately, has, if you like, the people of Castle Kerry feel like they've been invaded by developers, and where nearly 1,000 houses should this go through and the other developments. But there has to become a point that we have to accept these developments have to be, closure has to be brought on them. It is a case of you're never going to please all of the people all of the time. But on this occasion, I feel the need to support this application and recommend that we pass this application. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Messenger. Who else would like to add to it? Councillor Curley?
I'm happy to second if nobody else wants to say anything.
Thank you for that, Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. Whilst I think there have been concern expressed about this, planning's already there through the outline, and I don't see, looking at plans and reading the report, that there is any reason, particularly being mindful of the tilted balance, there is any reason for refusing this application. So I support both councillors Messenger and Curley in approving this application.
Councillor Mayo?
Yes, thank you. Is it possible to, we've heard about this hedge removal and the explanation of whys and wherefores. Is it possible to condition that it be replaced at the end of when the new access has been constructed, etc.?
It is already controlled by condition from the outline planning application.
Is it? I'm
So-
sorry.
Approved plans did clearly show landscaping along the roadside frontage. It's just that for the existing landscaping along that road frontage had to come out to get the access in the first place to do the funding.
Thank you.
Hey,
If no one else wishes to speak, then a proposal on the table by Councillor Messenger to approve, is seconded by Councillor Fairland. If no one else has any further comments, I'm happy to move to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. We move on to our next application, which is agenda item. We're just we're all just taking a quick 5-minute break, just so that members can use the facilities.
Join us, this is John, yeah.
Going on. Yeah. We'll get on what we've got. Not in that. That's something that's
when you use the same language to describe what we do, instantly, you know, that's
will be Thursday. Not Thursday, I think, just
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're back in the room. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, which is planning application 17//03320 outline and west of Bunton Hollow, West Coker. Councillor Ware.
I'm sorry to interrupt, I think I ought to declare a personal operational interest on this because the managing director or owner of this company is part of the local Conservative Association, which I am president of. He's a long-time member of it, so I think I want to create personal and not prejudicial interest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will hand you over to Tom, who's going to give the presentation. I'm guessing Sue's going to make a similar declaration. Yeah.
I'm not actually senior officer of the association, and I barely know, I think I know what he looks like, and that's about it in terms of all that particular relationship. The point I was going to raise was, should we not be looking?
It's been back. It was briefer than I thought.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
Access to OD. And also, the viability of assessment is linking the two together. So should we not be taking them together as a linked application? Just curious.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yes. You ever been to Australia? No.
But, thank you, councillor. But they're two separate applications.
Sorry, I think Mr. Norris, could I ask you to mute yourself, please?
I just get the feeling that if
Or could someone mute Mr. Norris?
Yeah, he's one of those people. He's not just good at what he does. He is incredible. Like, have you ever met those people who are so talented? I never.
Dave Norris, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we can hear you if you can mute sound.
I don't think he could.
There we go. Sorry, Tom.
Right, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, councillor. I did contemplate that, but it's two separate planning applications. One or either could be approved or refused separately. So, take them. I think once we go through the first one, the second presentation is very similar, so we'll get through it fairly quickly. But my view is it's two separate applications, so you might wish to approve both, you might wish to approve one and not the other. Yeah, or neither. Which becomes then difficult if you've got them together, because there are slightly different impacts on both.
Okay.
And then the logical order of what we call phase one, followed by phase two. And,
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll start the presentation, thank you. So it's, this one is, for the first one, west of Bunton Hollow, Coker. This one's an outline application for up to 100 dwellings, the new access towards Goodman Lane to the east, with open space and landscaping. So this is the location. It's literally over the road, so we should all know the site fairly well. Oh, that's what happened. And as you rightly point out, that's the other outline applications which sits to the west of this, the application we do now, and that'll be the second item that I'll present. So the recommendation is that planning permission is granted, subject to prior completion of the section 106 planning obligation and approval of the stated planning conditions, and that's delegated to the head planning in consultation with the chair. Section 106 covers affordable housing. That's been reduced, which I'll get into the detail about later in the presentation. Sport, recreation, space, education, health. The figures have been updated for health. I might as well give you them now. For this application, the contribution was 51,973.45. It's now 54,661. So it's only marginally more. And we'll perhaps get into the conversation about viability later. I would hope that that difference of 2,000, despite there being a viability issue, isn't too much of a problem. And then the other two items in the section 6 travel plan, highways matters and phosphate litigation. So as an outline application, we're considering the principle of development, highways impacts, and we'll look at impact on heritage and landscape, phosphates, drainage and liability. So although if it was allowed, there would be an existing plan that would be a condition. There will be reserved matters to look at the detail of the layouts and design. So looking at the site a bit more closely, it's an agricultural field, as we know, just over the road, the site immediately to the north. You can see my cursor there, and here is the employment application that has planning permission. I think there's an application in here that's not far from a decision, which is an indoor leisure facility. So the site subject to this application is immediately to the south. So we have an agricultural field. We've got Warscombe Lane to the east. I had a look this morning actually that this access road is already in here. It goes as far as just about there. There's I think one of the balancing ponds is already in. This is currently an access to these farm buildings. There's a thick hedgerow. Come back to that, it's very important. The land rises, it is fairly flat and it rises to the southern edge. And then indeed is the allocation to the north there. You can see this is the site, and that's the allocation. This is a key point to note for later in the presentation. So in terms of sort of development, it's immediately adjacent to strategically important settlement. There's employment here and good access to the road. So in terms of principle, it's acceptable to need to look at the details of access and look at impacts on landscape biodiversity, etc. That's it, an indicative layout. So we're in this application, we're interested in this area, but for information, I'm showing you both together to illustrate both this one and the next presentation that we have been taking cumulative impacts into account in dealing with both the applications. Here is an indicative layout for the commercial area to the north. So I think that balancing pond's already in, or so we've got an indicative layout of the land to the west there. You can see the retained hedgerows and trees. But this is what we're interested in at this time. The initiative I'll get into in a moment is about the height of buildings at the southern end, and also during the lifetime of the planning application. It's one of those that's been with us for quite a while. So phosphates, it's 2017 date. During that time, there's been a lot of updates on design and landscape mitigation, etc. And during that time, the open space will be moved to the higher land of the south, and there will be a condition require these buildings are no higher than I can't remember the exact number, 59 something meters to limit an avoid harm on the heritage asset to the west, but get us that in more detail.
59 metres.
59 metres.
59 metre tower. Let's see that within above all the stator. Oops. I should. So in terms of there was a landscape visual impacts appraisal, and then later there was an updated detailed heritage assessment that's been reviewed. I think we've got through one landscape officer and two conservation officers, police have reviewed that. Obviously, it was prepared initially by the applicants, specialists. The Historic England have been closely involved. She commented, the Gardeners Trust, South West Heritage. So the heritage asset, the main ones are of listed buildings and the historic park and garden at Brimton Diversey. Follow this, so that's. We're looking at this site here, so if you look at the distance there, it's about just under a kilometre to the nearest point at the south. The indicative layout, as I was alluding to earlier, retains this important tree, mature trees. I was on site earlier, there's some pretty big trees here, they will be retained. And some enhancement along there, and as I say, open space down here. The southern edge. I'll come back to heritage and landscape again in a moment. So this is the access arrangements. Highway authorities looked at these plans that would be conditioned. Obviously, it needs to go through for the highway process, and also consider the impact of individually and combined on the highway network. And so all highway matters are considered to be acceptable. The return to the landscape and heritage matters, I don't know how, hopefully you can see fairly well. So in the bottom right corner, we have this is a section looking from one far of where we are now, past the roundabout down to the sites. Here is the commercial development, and here are the two sites. So I'll talk through them both, but we're interested in this one here. So that's section A. Section B goes to the middle of Brimton Diversey and the listed buildings centre. And then section C at the southern end of the British Park Garden, looking eastwards. You can see that fairly well, actually. So it's here's the roundabout here. So we're looking south. Just realised I'm pointing with a white cursor on the white screen. Anyone now can change that. I'll talk through it. Unfortunately, my glasses to look at this, and now I have to take them off. So on the top there, on the far left, the very top left, you've got the roundabout there and developments up to. The blue in the middle is the commercial employment area. And oh, thank you. That's here. And then moving on, that is the site to the west. And as you can see, the site to the south at its southern end rises. So this shows kind of visibility line. This is largely screened in this northern section. And this is screened to an extent at the southern end, whereas the open space has been placed there in lower buildings to try and limit that view in that direction. Section BB from Brimton House here across the open land. This is the western site, which is the subject of the next application there. And so between that and the business park, sorry, that is the open fields. Then we've got the business park. Then we've got the western site. And then again, the site that we're interested now in green, the land's rising to the south. So you can see it's largely covered, as some of the photographs will show in a minute, it's into visibility is very limited. I stood on the site earlier today and looked back and could barely see anything. I think views from the stand being into a moment, you might have to see both juxtaposed. But in terms of intervisibility, it's very limited, if anything, and there are thick tree, mature trees already that will be retained. And then this one looking from the south, looking eastwards across the open fields, then the western development, then this development. So between this development and the southern end of the Rose Park and Garden, there are intervening buildings, open space, open fields and trees. So this is looking into the site from that farm trail I was talking about earlier. You can see these mature trees providing a good screen. That's views out to the west towards Brimton. This is looking northwards towards Yeovil and backwards to Fortcombe Lane. That's the access. Here you can see that this one, you can the extent of the site, see how well it's screened is this. This is Fortcombe Lane looking sort of westwards across the sites. This is going to develop on the east side of Fortcombe Lane, so obviously no visibility there. This is from the roundabout. Is it Brimton Hollow? I name of it. Brimton Hollow. Yeah. Looking towards the site. So here you could have the commercial employment development here, and the sites will be behind, so barely visible, effectively. This is coming up the road, so you can see the council offices appearing here. So it's literally over the road, looking towards the sites. This would be the employment uses here and the development. Again, this thick screen of trees. Going further up the road, this hedgerow here is part. I think it's part of the western site, whereas the site we're looking at now is down here. And then we go further up the hill, you can start seeing more of it. Again, that's the western site. The site we're interested in is down here. Similarly, again, I think you can see development to the south of the site there. We're down here. And another one, so further up the hill go, the more you might see of the western area, that this area's screened, and of course you'd have employment development in here as well. I was looking from the airport, and there's that hedgerow, and this field here that when you come down that hill, that's that bright green field that you can see that's not being developed. It's outside the application area. And that's from the housing development to the south, largely screened. I think it's on public footpath. So I think here's where you might see some of the development, and then to the left you might see Brimton Diversity Park and Garden. That's the only way you might see them both in the same viewpoint. And that's the west, looking back towards where we are now. The development's down here. You have the employment development behind it here and seeing over there. This is a view looking from Brimton House Garden towards the site. So I think if you look at the WA Heritage Assessment carefully, I think there are views from other stories in some of the buildings here, but the setting of the park and garden, the setting of the listed building, considered one. The heritage officer, conservation officer, has reviewed the current conservation officer and concurred with the previous conservation officer, who considered there was less than substantial harm. So in accordance with paragraph 215 of the NPPF, you balance that with public benefit. So in this instance, the public benefit of the delivery of housing considered to the less than substantial harm is considered unbalanced to make them acceptable. The Garden Trust and Historic England no longer takes objection on the basis of the lower housing, the open space to the south, and the lower house, and the retention of the trees, the enhancement of that, to ensure maximum optimum tree cover between the two sites. They're all conditions. And I think the Garden Trust has retained an objection, but has emphasised the importance of those same set of conditions. Only highlighting an important issue here that we have just to give an idea, it's just one of many photographs that were submitted, shows that there is already light pollution, but that doesn't mean we need to make it any worse. So there is a condition requiring a lighting plan that would be wouldn't have unnecessary harmful impacts on biodiversity. So by definition, it would limit the light. In terms of amenity for neighbouring residents. Just dropped in the drainage scheme there, it feeds in, I think, so that I think that's the road that's been partially constructed, and I think that's already in there, so the drainage scheme is feeding in this site to the same drainage scheme that's been implemented to the north. And the local flood authority is quite happy that as long as that's conditioned, that matters surface waters addressed. So just to summarise on the key considerations, principal development, just consider that's acceptable. Highways, the highway authorities consider the access and the impact on volume of traffic on highways, and that's acceptable. We've considered in great detail the impact on heritage and the heritage landscape and the mitigation, the existing tree cover with additional mitigation measures that I've described. Because it's the conservation officer, landscape officer, and subsequently myself, the planning officer, consider that's acceptable. Phosphates is covered by section 106 and drainage. So just explained is the LLB is satisfied that that's addressed fully. Then I just wanted to touch on viability. The applicant at some point, not sure when, so I've been with this application since 2017, so submitted a viability assessment due to perhaps at abnormal costs with reducing the heights of the ground level to ensure that restriction on heights could be retained. So there'll be some abnormal costs there. I think phosphates came along later. I think people are now building that into their costs. So that and other matters. And the viability was an issue. A viability assessment was submitted to the council. It was fully reviewed, and I can see in the records there was a lot of further questions and careful review and consideration by the Three Dragons, which I think we've used many times before. They were satisfied that if the affordable housing amount was lowered to, it was between 10 and 15%. They could then retain all other section 106 requirements, and the affordable housing officer considered that 15% affordable rent would be acceptable in those circumstances. So our viability advises that would be acceptable, a reduction of affordable housing and the retention of all the other section 106 requests, including the SIP, which as we know is almost 56 points. I've forgotten now. 56 point something pounds per square metre. So just return to the recommendation that permission be granted subject to 106. And conditions, which are all listed in the report. That's just a reminder of what's in 106. It's just with there, I'll conclude my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. We will move on to there's no commissioner speaking in favour or against this application, so we'll move straight on to the applicant agent, who is Austin Scripps from Abbey Malachy. Thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman of the Committee. Thank you for considering our proposal for 100 new homes for Bumford Hollow. This council's appointed viability consultant has confirmed the scheme is able to provide all of the agreed contributions to education, open space, transport, NHS, as well as its silk contributions to the town's general infrastructure, totaling £1,185,000, as well as providing 10% affordable housing if developed in isolation, or 15% if developed in association with the adjacent site, which is subject to the following application. Our proposed access to Waterloo Lane has been assessed by the Highways Authority as suitable not only in isolation, but also in conjunction with both the next application that you will consider, as well as the application to the north, which would all share the same access. The site falls within the Somerset Levels Ramsar catchment area and therefore needs to provide nutrient neutrality. The submitted mitigation scheme approved by Somerset Ecological Services and Natural England includes the planting of some additional woodland on the western boundary, as well as the provision of off-site credits. These credits have been secured to Pentrade, and therefore should the committee be minded to approve the application, allowing for a swift commencement on site. This proposal provides a pedestrian connection for the footpath Y 29/20 in the Bumford Heights scheme to the south, for an improved pedestrian refuge crossing point at Waterloo Lane as part of the new access. This will allow the users of the footpath to avoid the unrestricted pedestrian crossing halfway out Waterloo Lane. The proposal also allows for pedestrians and cycle integration in both the new employment development of Bumford Park to the north, as well as the existing pedestrian and cycle crossings for the junction of Waterloo Lane and Live Road. New residents will therefore be in close proximity to public transport, as well as numerous amenities within walking and cycling distance. The landscaping proposals include a 10-metre buffer of understory planting under the line of oak trees on the western boundary of the site, as well as reinforced hedge planting on the eastern boundary of Waterloo Lane. The maximum roof height of the development has been restricted 69.34 metres AFD to limit the visual impact the scheme would have on the Grade 1 listed Brimton FC and its gardens. So considering South Somerset's current housing and land supplies, we believe that this development will make a sustainable contribution, as well as providing much needed market and affordable housing in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, questions? Councillor Steve?
Yes, I was going to work on position in respect of the National Planning Policy Framework and the balance of the trade-off that we're doing with respect to heritage assets. What I would like a little bit of clarity on is the duty under section 66(1) of the Planning List of Buildings and Conservation's Area Act 1990, which is separate legislation. I was presuming that is not subject to the tilting balance, am I correct?
Well, a planning decision's always the tilted balance that you look at the harm and the benefit. But harm to a listed building of a certain level is significant. But you can't accept harm to any interest in the balance of a planning decision. You've got to be clear about what that harm is, what the public benefit is.
I'm not quite clear to the answer to my question. My thinking on this is that the type from which we derive our national planning policy framework, it contains the tilted balance in the national planning policy framework. However,
there are separate duties under the 1990 Act. Are those inside the planning policy framework, and thus we've changed the way that we approach a separate act?
So paragraph 66(1) sets out the general duties in respect of listed buildings exercising planning functions. So it says, in considering whether to grant planning permission or permission in principle for development that affects a listed building or its setting, the local planning authority will, Secretary of State, shall have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, or any features of special architectural or historic interest which it possesses. It doesn't say anything specifically about the tilted balance, but in terms of determining the planning application, that is then set out in the MPF and in the other guidance. So we have given due regard to preserving the building, its setting, and special architectural and historical interest. We've undertaken LBIA, we've consulted a number of specialists that have raised comments and questions. We have no objection from Historic England. They have suggested we consult the Conservation Officer. Conservation Officer confirms that there is some harm to the listed building, but in terms of mitigation and applying the tilted balance, which is the then listed building officer's responsibility and duty, based on the intervening length between where the development is proposed to be the existing commercial development and the screening with additional conditions, which is what they've put forward. Actually, they were satisfied that the less than significant harm was outweighed by public benefits. So that weighting is done through the application process. The paragraph 661 just says that we need to have consideration of it, which is what we've done.
Thank you. Curly.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some concerns about how we are viewing this as two separate applications. To me, there is a material issue when it comes down to social rented housing. For me, this is one of the biggest issues with this application. And we're being told that it's 10% if we just pass this one planning application. But if we pass both planning applications, it's 15%. So I'm a little bit concerned how I could make this decision, because to me, that is absolutely material, the difference between 10 and 15%. Yet I could be passing this now, yeah, or agreeing to pass this, only to find that I can't pass the next one, and actually I've then impacted on my own material reasoning. And I'm a little bit concerned. I'd like an explanation how I will deal with that, please.
Yeah.
So I understand from the beginning, I was just trying to find the heads of terms in terms of what the recommendation at the end is. So I think the recommendation at the end is that basically there has been an independent viability assessment undertaken with the council and the developer's viability expert. It has been independently appraised by Three Dragons. They have looked at both schemes together, because actually if you look at both schemes together, you could get more out of the development scheme in terms of value, you know, because you're buying the materials in bulk, you've got the labour on site, you know, if you're dealing with them separately, there would be a greater cost for separating them. So by going through the viability for both schemes, I fully accept that for members that's perhaps a little unclear, but the recommendation is basically they cannot achieve 35% affordable housing on this scheme or the other, which is why there's a viability appraisal. The question we then ask is, okay, you can't achieve 35, what can you achieve? And then it comes into a tenure mix, because the balance of how much it costs to build the site depends on what you're offering those units out for. So there is a difference between affordable rent and social rent. So affordable rent is still an affordable housing product. It's still a cheaper rent than market rent, but it's not as cheap as social rent. But that means the developer gets less in return for it. So the question was that as a local authority, if we particularly want social rent, if that's really important to us as a local authority to have social rent, which is 50% market value, they can only provide 10%. If we want that as a product on this site, it's 10%. And similarly, if we want it for a product on the next site, it would be 10%, because that's all they can afford, because that product is more expensive to deliver. If we as a local authority are satisfied with affordable rent, which is 80% market value for rental, they can deliver 15% because it's a cheaper product to value it. It's how they balance the tenure. So the resolution is to grant, and the gift is with members, whether you want to grant with affordable rent, or if you're particularly passionate about social rent, you can go for social rent, but the cost of that is.
Yeah, I think my concern there is that if I was to pass this one, because that is absolutely material, I want that 15%, does that not make me predetermined going into the next application?
That means in terms of delivery, that element is set, because it's the same viability information we're looking at for both schemes. But the justification for both schemes, if you look on, I think it's summarised within Constantine responses, I'm just scrolling up to see if I can find it, but there's effectively a table. So they were looking at the development of the site overall and the contributions from the site overall. So for phase 1, it's 2.7 million. For phase 2, it's 2.3, and it's the value of those contributions against the cost and value of delivering on those sites, which gives you that percentage. If the decision of the committee is you want 15% affordable rent, then you have accepted that it's 15% affordable rent in principle on the other side as well. If not, I would suggest it's a resolution that it could be either or, which doesn't then predetermine you. But the preference from officers at the moment is 15%, because it would gain us more in terms of affordable products.
Can I just check? So close clarify that then we could make a decision on this application without deciding on which type of housing you wanted. And then you could determine the second application, and then following both applications, you could decide whether you wanted to then apply 10% social or 15% affordable, but it would be the same on both sides. So you could determine both applications and then decide on the housing type after, if that's what those want.
But surely that's material to this application.
The viability is the same for both. So the cost you're looking at in terms of the scheme is the same for both, in terms of there are infrastructure costs that make it unviable for both schemes to deliver 35%. I understand the reasoning, because it could have been split in a different way. It could have been a split that actually phase 1 could have delivered 35%, phase 2 could have delivered nothing. But either which way, there's still a balance to be made on the site as a whole, because the site as a whole cannot give a contribution. But the viability information is there. You're right, it's the same information for both sites.
Councillor Wales.
Yeah, thank you. Mine was probably much simpler than that. Am I right in thinking this is these sites rather are on the local plan for Yeovil, and they also are they on the expansion of Yeovil already on the plan? I'm trying to remember whether they are. They're not. They were. So they're new sites. They're not on the local plan at all. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you, Chair. The procedural suggestion would help Councillor Curley's problem. You might just take an indicative vote on the first one, and then vote on the second one, and then come back and take a formal vote on the first one.
If members were minded to approve the first one, it could be subject to sort of revisiting the 10-15% affordable at the conclusion of the recommendation of the second one.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be okay, this is probably a very simple one, but I have to ask it anyway. When the Eastern Corridor was done years ago, it had an assessment by our highways, and it was, and it's
It's perfect. However, going back in time, the highway, I've been to the Highways Authority based on objection and it's certified that the proposed development would not create a severe highway safety or efficiency use. The way I see it today is, the slip road at the Westlands roundabout moves the traffic out of this town quite reasonably. And it all works. However, can you just confirm that this is, I think it's from, that this is going to work? I'm not an engineer for highways, so I don't know. But according to this statement, it says this will work. It's going to cause no severe, not severe, but any issue to anything moving on that road going out of town at the moment. And the second one is, when we're talking about the cost-based credits, I'm a bit confused. Don't lie me on this one. I thought we lived near the River Yeo, not the River Parrot. Is that correct?
Just going to have a microphone a second. That's just having one. And then to go and go at the second.
Yeah. But as a local person, it confuses me. On the Parrot catchment.
Yeah, the Yeo is part of the character.
Does the Parrot capture the Yeo?
The catchment to the River Parrot, which is the River Yeo, the River Arms. And various other.
But if you're going to do about something, you could ask a question. I don't do with members party. So that's why I chair.
Okay, so, perhaps we were just having a look at the sort of matters that were considered when we went to our assessment. So you've heard your planning officer saying in planning terms, the principle of these developments is okay. We looked at, for example, the improvements on the Western Corridor that have already been put in. You've mentioned the slip road on towards the A303. That works nicely. Those works on the Western Corridor have also implemented the pedestrian and new cycling infrastructure. We looked at the fact that this development will link into new pedestrian and cycling infrastructure, new pedestrian crossings on what main links to the public rights of way. It will also be in proximity to commercial sites, walking distance of employment land, walking distance of passenger transport infrastructure. There is evidence coming forward that the COVID crisis actually lowered some of the ambient traffic figures on the entire network because of working from home practices, amended working practices within the business and employment base. So taking all of those points into account and looking at, again, you heard your planning officer say that the cumulative effect of not just these 100 units, but also the 185 sites as well that you're going to consider next. These two developments combined will generate 95 vehicles in the peak hour. That's less than 2 vehicles a minute. So in accordance with the NPPF, the only grounds we can complain about and raise objections on is if the impact on the highway network is severe and there is a strong reason to complain. And taking everything I've just said into account, the highway authorities intend that there will not be a severe impact on the highway, especially as well. Site frontage on the Walking Lane is perfectly big enough to create those cycling pedestrian infrastructure improvements and a new road access junction perfectly in accordance with the
I meant west, not east. I do apologise.
That's what.
Yeah, thank you. I think probably splitting it into two sites hasn't made it that easy, particularly in relation to affordable issues around affordable housing. I'm just curious, why was this split into two sites rather than being kept as one site of 185 houses? Because it's clearly been assessed for viability and highways on that basis.
My understanding is that this other person came in 2017. I think it was delayed so long that what now is known as phase 2 came forward in 2023. So that's why we've been broken into two applications. Then subsequently, as one caught up with the other, they're now being looked at cumulatively. And that's why the viability assessment was done for both.
Okay. So again, going back to Tim's issue, and I have some quite a sympathy with that you're almost compromising yourself, because if you only pass one, it's 10%, if you pass two, it's 15. So in a way, you're putting yourself in that predetermined position. Could we not vote on this one, but sort of defer a vote in inverted commas until after we've made a decision on the second element? Thank you. Would that make life easier in some respects? Because instead of deferring for another meeting, all you're doing is deferring until you've heard the second application and then make a decision, because at that point you'll have all the facts in front of you.
Thank you. In terms of the recommendation I heard earlier, I was under the understanding that members were going to be voting in the general principle with the caveat that the 10 or 15% would remain outstanding until we've concluded on the second application. The difference for members to consider is the tenure, because if members are particularly wedded to social rent, then the percentage is 10%, because they cannot achieve social rent unless they are providing 10%. So it's about whether members feel that social rent versus affordable rent is so highly demanded that actually we would want less social rent properties to enable that as a product to be available. And that's the same consideration for this site or the next one. But effectively, if members are not sort of particularly concerned about whether it's social rent or affordable rent, ideally, as an authority, we would want to get the maximum we can. So we would go with 15%. But fully accepting we can't have 15% on one and 10% on the other. So given that caveat, the question I think for members is it's a tenure question. Are you particularly wedded to social rent versus affordable rent? In which case it's 10%. But if that is the only question, you can have a resolution on the general direction of travel for the application and then confirm after you've considered both applications whether it is 10 or 15%. So you are not boxing yourself in for the second application.
So just to double underline, what we're going to do is we're going to either approve or not this application, and then do the same on the second application, and then decide on the overall amount, whether you actually want it to be social rent or affordable rent. So whether you approve or disapprove on the applications that we're doing today.
Yeah, just a bit of clarification. So I personally, I would want to keep the social rent. I think that's what we really need in Somerset. I just want to get some clarity. So you're saying that it's 10% if it's social rent, but 15% if it's affordable rent. Is that across both sites?
Yes.
Yeah. So if we were to go for social rent, we're only going to get 10%, even if we approve both sites. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That wasn't clear to me to start with. Okay.
Understanding is it's 10% per site of the social rent.
So looking at like just a rough ballpark thing, you'd be looking at 10%, 110, 10% of, if you were looking at 780, whatever it's going to be about 8. So you'd be looking at 18 across the two sites, social rent, and about 27 affordable rent across the two sites if they were both.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Sorry to keep going back. So where does this discrepancy come from between passing the two and it being 10 and 15%? If it's, I've got myself really confused, so I just want this explained to me for dummies, if you can, please.
Can I just check? I'm guessing that the social rent is a more expensive product to be delivered, which is why the amount of money in the pot, you can deliver X for that, you can deliver X amount of houses from that pot. Social ones are more expensive to build, which is why you're getting less.
I get that, I just don't get the procedure behind what we're trying to do here. So to start with, I thought it'd be presented to me that we would get 10% social, or I didn't realise that difference if we were developing one. But if we're developing two, we get 15%. But now I'm hearing that's not true if we're going to go for social rents. I'm really confused. I'm back to square one, I'm afraid.
I think you're confusing it. So it's not 10% if you approve application A, but then 15% if you approve application A and B. What they're saying is there is a pot of money available in each application site to be spent on house, social or affordable housing. You can only have one option across the two sites. You can either have all social or all affordable. With that pot of money, you can have 10% afford social or 15% affordable. What they're not saying is if you approve one of the applications, not the other, you're going to get one or the other. You can't split 10%, can't have affordable in one and social in the other. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Does that explain it?
No, I'm really confused. Yeah.
Tim, go try and explain what you're after again and see if we can.
I'm struggling to articulate myself, and I think it is because of the fact that we have these two applications. So my earlier point that I said that was said, I had the answer, was that it seemed to confirm that it would be 15% if we had two, and then 10% if we had one. I'm so confused as to what's happening here, and I think the cause of that is the two separate applications.
Councillor Steve and then Councillor Stanton.
I just want to pick up on something that was in the developer's presentation on the access road, where it was mentioned that the access road had been assessed against the phase 1 site and the phase 2 site, and a site to the north. Is there a further housing site, or is that the farm?
The land to the north is the employment allocation, and I think the eastern side there's a live application for the recreational use.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to help Councillor Kelly. Your initial understanding, Kim, was wrong. The one is contingent on the other. If we approve this first application and we specify that it's social rent, that'll be 10%, 10 houses. Is that right? 10. Then when we approve the second one, we will also have to do 10%. Conversely, if we approve the first one with 15% affordable, then we must do 15 the second one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Curley?
I'm not happy, but I understand.
You understand, okay. Are there any further, Councillor Osborne, questions?
Yeah, it's just a quick question, but if you go for affordable rent, then is there the opportunity for any grant funding into this scheme from Homes England? So I know they don't grant social housing, but they do grant affordable. Because that might give you an opportunity to perhaps increase the load date.
There are various grants that become available from time to time. They sit outside of any planning section 106, because when they are available for additionality. So they wouldn't be part of the consideration that the members can give to this scheme.
But potentially at a later date, if they came along, you could sort of add extra into that one.
I think the applicants are here and the applicants can hear the councillor's wish, but it wouldn't be something we would categorically control through planning, because we can't, I think.
Okay, if there are no further questions, going to move us into the debate, and I'll start with Councillor Stanton.
Well, maybe it's not still a question, because I was seeing the applicants nodding at the notion that in effect 15% affordable might be better than 10% social. So from their point of view, are you nodding at that?
So let's not go there. We've moved into the debate, so who would like to go next? Councillor Steve.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, I had a number of difficulties with the quality of the evidence around planning file, which isn't surprising given that it's dating back to 2017 and has been through many iterations. But I am pleased that with respect to this first parcel in the developer's presentation, he addressed my concerns, which were the western edge and the thickening of the planting on the western edge. And I also appreciate the difficulties of this particular site and the efforts that have been made over the years to actually achieve connectivity. Normally, you would rule out outside the ring road development because it's across the ring road. It's just very difficult to get. And we've had a steady improvements in the infrastructure, the walking cycling infrastructure, to allow you to get on and off the thing. So I have to say, on balance, and it is a tilted balance, I'm minded to support this. And I'll propose the officer's recommendation.
Okay, who would like to go next? Next, Ms. Griffith.
I'll second that.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to add to the debate at all, or is everybody happy that we? So if there is a proposal, a second on the table, I just want to check that with the proposal and second that you're proposing to approve this application, and then we will hear the second application, and then at the end of the second application, make a decision on the social or affordable rent. Is that your proposal as the secretary? Yeah. So that's the proposal on the table. We'll have a show of hands for those in favour of that proposal. Okay, those against and abstentions. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 7, which is again it's application 23/02549 outline land at Bunford Hollow, west of Waterton Lane, east of Orleans Farm, west of Copeland. I will hand you to Tom for the presentation.
Thank you, Jess. My sense of occasion up here. Yes.
Nice stuff.
You. These machines.
Yes, yeah. Planning inside the city now. We go.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, very similar, presentation. I mean, I'll just highlight the differences and, work through quickly, halting at the key points. Not moving. That's it. This is the site just to the west, so it's outline application up to 85 dwellings with open space, landscape and drainage access. The site we've just been looking at, this is the land to the west. I'll show you. We'll go into those visuals later so you can see the context better. We know where the site is. That's the some existing farm buildings there. This is that access road in there. That's the farm access there. There's the belt of trees. So with the west side of that now. And that's the application we've been looking at. For the same recommendation, grant subject to 106 and conditions delegated to the head of planning chair. And the same applies to 106. Again, I have an update on from NHS. I think we were asking for 43,992. They now have asked for 45,725. So bearing in mind viability, it's not a great deal more, but I hope we can secure that additional payment for the NHS. Same matters that we're looking at. So I won't, we know where the site is, I won't label that one. I think these attenuation ponds are within the site boundary. And the blue line is the employment, allocated employment site that has outline. And just to confirm, either this site or a site are allocated in the plan, but as sites immediately adjacent to Yeovil, they're considered to be sustainable locations. And just more context, that's the Princeton Diversity Historic Park and Garden. That's the the full exclusion zone. That's the height limitations from the airport. And there's the all the developments that if all the both these two are approved, this is what we're looking at in this area. This already has outline. There's an application in here that's going to soon be a decision. This is what we've just been looking at. And this site here is what we're considering now. This one is flatter here, but obviously I'll show you on the draw on the photographs we got looked at later. The land rises here, so we'll look at this hedgerow is important. That's an enhanced hedgerow. We can look on the photographs in a moment to if we just note where that is. That's that thick hedgerow on this side, and this here will be enhanced to living views in from this direction. So obviously the historic park and garden is northwest of this, and that's largely screened. We'll look at that in more detail in a moment. We've seen this already, it's where the heritage assets are. Yeah, that's just an indicative layout that would be the starting point for the reserve matters as a conditioned. As a conditioned indicative layout plan. You can see here, this is structure planting and adjoining scheme. So planting here, limiting views westwards, and here planting trees, all to limit and mitigate the intervisibility between east and west. We looked at this, the same access point onto Watercombe Lane. We've looked at that. And this is the diagram we looked at earlier. Just to reiterate views that we see that. So again, we're looking at this site here, as we've seen that in what has outline permission there, that view is screened to a great degree. And similarly there's planting here and there's planting on the site that will limit views into the site and out of the site. We looked at these earlier, and I'll focus in on the key ones in a moment. Now stop if I'm going too quick, so I'm trying to get to those ones from the relief road down to the site. To these, so the sites that was the hedgerow I was pointing out. Sites in here. So it's the further you go up the hill, the more you can see of it. But obviously you'd have a large employment development in front here. That's coming further eastwards, so we look now looking across here. That's from the roundabout. So some of the site will be seen, the tops of the roofs may be seen behind, if at all, the direction here. So the employment used to be here. And that's the hedgerow. That's from the housing development to the town there. The views in. So this is where, from this sport plant, you have views across into here. This you'd have the employment use and the housing here, and the housing just being looked at there. Similarly with this one. Again, I showed this earlier, so the intervisibility and the setting of the listed building is respected. There is harm from the employment use that's already has permission. But the harm to heritage assets is considered as less than substantial. So we talked about that once earlier, and it's very much the same for this application. We talk about lighting, again, as a condition for a lighting plan. Same drainage plan, LLFA is satisfied. So I've quickly raced through all our principal highways, heritage and landscape, phosphates with section 106, drainage plan, and then we have the liability again, exactly the same as the other considerations. And that concludes presentation on this. Sure, to look at and I think the key thing again is that landscape and heritage impact, and I'm sure we'll consider the viability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no objectors or supporters wishing to speak. No one from the parish council, so I'll move straight to Austin Squibs from having on their group. It's someone else. I was just thinking that as you walked up. I would let you introduce yourself.
Judith Gunn.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. I would like to thank you, Officer, for the comprehensive report and for active engagement throughout the planning process. I guess it's been a very good experience. This application is for 85 homes on the land directly to the west of the phase 1 development which you have just considered, and directly to the south of Balford Park, Business Park, for which the infrastructure has just been completed. So the traffic lights that you see over there, and all the ponds and things are all part of that Balford Park development. One of the balancing ponds within Balford Park will be extended if this application is approved in order to accommodate surface water. This application shares the same access as phase 1, and your highway officers have assessed the cumulative impact of phases 1, 2, and the proposed leisure plan that the officer has suggested and considered it to be acceptable. It has been agreed through the viability assessment, and I've further discussion conducted by Three Dragons, that we can provide either 10% or 15%, depending on tenure of the affordable housing. And in addition to that, we will provide all of the rest of the contributions for education, open space, transport, NHS, and we will also already secure the mitigation credits required for the neutrality kind of prospects. There are no flooding concerns, though the local flood authority have confirmed they have no objections subject to conditions. The impact on the surrounding landscape and heritage, you've heard about particularly from Brooks and Delsey. It has been agreed that it is less than substantial harm. We are proposing landscape enhancements to all the boundaries, particularly to the northern boundary to the Balford Park to mitigate against any employment interference, and also to the southern boundary, which was the boundary that you can see on your officer's photographs, which is the one sort of going on the hill, if you like. And western boundary, obviously, we've already started the planting there as part of the London Park development, and that will also be enhanced. This proposal is deliverable. It makes a major contribution to local housing demand supply. It provides a huge boost to the economy through the creation of jobs during the construction phase, the use of local suppliers, labour, and long-term injection of disposable income, which will benefit our own local economy and businesses. I can do no more than recommend your office support to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we go into questions or points of clarification. Who would like to start us off? Or are we, that's your thought?
Just very briefly, when you come to do the landscaping plans proposals, and certainly impact on Ripton diversity, are you going to ask or insist that some of the shrubs and trees you use may be more mature specimens going in and being planted, so you've got a bit of a head start, so you get that screening developing much quicker?
Yes, I've noted that. It's very sensible. That would be the approach, but that will be because it provides earlier cover.
Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to go back to this social rented versus affordable. I don't think I can ever remember that we've had a decision to make in a planning committee where we've actually specifically had to choose which of these. And I think there are some, considering this, I think there are some implications of this decision that I just don't feel equipped to make today. This is a bolt from the blue for me. Perhaps I should have seen it when I read through, and I've obviously misinterpreted what I've read. But I'm struggling with this a little bit because we're having to make a decision here that I feel I haven't had three thoughts about, and I would go home and I'd want to think about this, and I want to think about the implications. I think I am going to abstain for the rest of these because I just don't feel confident that I'm equipped to be making the right decision. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Thomas. Can you just clarify and remind me, in terms of the children of these houses which are going to be put out, are they going to be able to have sort of fairly safe pedestrian cycle access to primary and secondary schools in that area? I don't know that side of Yeovil that well. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer that, but I'm aware there's a walkable school like I get. Well, while we're debating, I think I'd like to look at the detail.
Thank Thank you.
Councillor Stanton?
It's a question, Tom, about the way in which, if it was social housing, it gets provided. If the decision was that both these developments are going to have social housing rather than affordable, does that mean that the developer then has to bring in a housing association to do that bit, or do they do it themselves?
Yeah, my advice would be a housing association on registered provider.
Any further questions or points of clarification? If not, are we happy to move to the vote? Someone looking to make a proposal? Councillor Stanton?
Yeah, I've just been doing a quick read on what the advantages are of doing social rented rather than affordable, without going into the details of it. I'm with Jim really that the way for this to be done is social housing rather than affordable. So I guess the proposal has to be simply to approve the officer's recommendation at this stage. There's no interest on the application. And then there's the type of housing is provided as a secondary consideration.
Can I just check, are you making that proposal? You are. Okay, so Councillor Steve?
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to make any points of clarification or any debate on this application? If not, it has been proposed and seconded. Councillor Steve?
Yeah, but just make a quick point. I think it has actually been very useful to have both applications in front of us. I remember the bad old days when we used to incremental supplies, extras coming in. At least now we've seen thing around and decided it, albeit in two halves.
Okay, so we have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendation with the same caveat of discussing the type of housing afterwards. Can I have a show of hands for all of those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. Now I am kind of being guided in the dark here as to how we want to decide on the type of housing. Is that something you just want to take a vote on? Do you want discussion on this? Councillor C?
Chairman, I'm fairly familiar with the sort of that bit of land over there and its environs, and I think actually this is a case where the fall of the affordable housing or social rent really needs to reflect where it is. It is a very isolated development there, and I would be a little concerned overriding an officer recommendation in this regard. I would prefer that the housing team made a proposal and it was done in conjunction with the chair, to be honest, which is what the original section 106 was. Because I just feel if we force it one with the other, we can make a mistake.
In terms of, I think there was an earlier comment about, making the judgment and making the balance and members having not been in that situation before. And I think that's right, because normally what happens is the viability work happens and the tenure is agreed with the affordable housing team, and then it gets presented to members as whatever the outcome is. So you get whatever percentage is recommended to you. Obviously, the difference in terms of options was 15% provision or 10% provision, but very different tenure types. It is completely right and within members' gift to defer confirming that percentage to officers in discussion with the chair and vice chair, because then it would just go back to the affordable housing team. What might then happen, I don't know, because it would be down to the affordable housing team, but it might be that you get less than 15%, but maybe you get a little bit of both. But that is what would have to be looked at in terms of provision. If the affordable housing team actually go in terms of delivery for provision, we haven't had that much affordable rent and that's what we really need, then maybe it'll be the 15%. But if members are happy to leave that with the affordable housing officers, The DM officers can take that back with the affordable housing officers and clear it via the chair and vice chair if you're happy to take that decision.
What's members' thoughts on that one?
Good idea.
Councillor
Looking at, I don't know what page it is, 151, is that? The application will be approved subject to the prior signing of the 106 agreement and subject to stated planning conditions. Is that's what we're going for, I presume, is it? In which case, surely that takes into account what we've just been talking about, because the 106 agreement is still to be approved. So that the 10-15% will surely be subject to the prior signing of the 106 agreement. Is that right?
That's right.
So the recommendation on the papers covers this point, surely.
Yeah.
So that's what we voted.
Yeah.
So, we've done it. Frankly, yeah.
But we actually agreed to decide on what that was after, so if members are happy, so I'm happy to propose that, this is done by the officers and that comes back in delegation to myself and the vice chair. If members are happy with that, can I have a show of hands to show in favour of that option? Sorry, yes, actually, before we get there.
So just to point out, there is a little bit of conflict in the report because the bottom of the report says either or, so it does cover both options. Near the top of the report, it does say 15% for all rent. So just to mark that there is a slight conflict in the drafting of the report, but ultimately the recommendation does say either or. So if members are happy to leave that to officers, we will take that as an either or, and we'll take that offline and you can use part of 106.
Thanks for asking.
I wonder with this one, whether, because there is concern over some people feel it should be social rent and you take the 10% as against the 15% with affordable. Would it be possible that the ward members are also added into the consultation because they're the people on the ground?
You.
Thanks, Patrick.
If I may quickly, this is a really confusing,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, because this is technically in West Coker, but this is so disconnected from West Coker, it's arguably in Oakley. So that's kind of why I'm kicking my ass, but it's a good point you raised. I don't know the answer to any of this. I wish this hadn't happened and I'd like not to see this again. I think it's very confusing. I can't with it too.
Yeah.
It's been very, very difficult to resolve this.
That's what it's offensive.
Okay. So, I don't think any of us are better placed to say what's needed than the housing team. So, we might think what's in or we know about it, we probably don't. So I would suggest that you do, a recommendation, Jason, and if you're going to suggest that that's what we do, that we, put it to the housing team and then, in consultation with the chairman, vice chair, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Okay, everyone is happy so far. We're proposing a second there for this to be referred to the housing team and come back to chair by chair. General officers, all those in favour? Those against? And abstentions. Thank you very much. I think it was difficult. I would prefer that we didn't have this come in this way if possible in the future. It would normally be a recommendation in the papers as to how it's being dealt with, and I think that's probably the best way forward. Okay, so very quickly moving on to agenda item 8, which is the planning appeals report, which is in your pack there. Our members happy to note that report. Thank you very much. That's brings us to the end of our meeting, and I will see you all again next month. Thank you very much.